I'm Dr. Anna Camerali. I manage the Create Centre, with which you're obviously already very familiar, but at other times I have also been known to be a recovering academic, and my field is Shakespeare, and in particular, Shakespeare from the point of view of a theatre practitioner. So anything that is involved with the doing of Shakespeare rather than necessarily coming to it from a literary perspective. Now, that being so, I also have quite the interest in innovative pedagogies in regards to introducing people to Shakespeare. So what I'm going to be talking to you about is introducing Shakespeare to an audience that is perhaps a little younger than people usually expect you to do that. I have spent some time working with Shakespeare with primary school students. Now, if you are interested in the theoretical aspects of that, I'll show you where that's published in a moment. But my interest in doing this with primary children is that they are so incredibly open to many of the things that make working with Shakespeare easier. They are very open to new vocabulary, to discussing feelings. They do a lot of work naming feelings in primary school, and they're very familiar with undertaking guided play, particularly in the format of physical group work. So I figured I could leverage all that to get them working on Shakespeare. Now, if you would like to read more of the research aspects of that, it's published here in a chapter I co-authored with Marilyn Fleer. Now, slight caveat, this was looking at early childhood is the framework for this chapter, whereas what I'm describing to you is actually mostly going to be with slightly older children, because I'm talking about working with readers, although the exercises can be adapted to use with pre-readers. So this is what we're trying to do with introducing Shakespeare at this level. I'm trying to connect to things that they already know how to talk about, that is their emotions, but to do that in new ways by encouraging imaginative connection with their classmates in terms of a higher level of listening and a new range of physical and verbal forms of presentation. So let's talk about the text that I use for this, because the key to everything I do is that I absolutely use the original text. I don't paraphrase, I don't sub in easier language. I don't give them big chunks of anything. I choose what I give them very carefully, very selectively, and I keep the pieces short. And I'll show you a couple of examples of that in a moment. But I do always use the original Shakespearean text. Now, I'll just tear through a couple of the introductory exercises I do before I explain to you about the sort of the core group Devised project that I use when I run these workshop sessions. Um, as I said, I'm trying to get them to understand that they can express themselves in a way that they connect with things they already understand about emotions, but do it in new ways with new verbal techniques. And so this is one thing I do where I give them little bits that are actually labeled with a feeling, and then work with them to attach the feeling to the language expression, and you just would not believe the results you can get from that. It's amazing. Um, when we all went into lockdown in 2020, I did also say yes to adapting this to online sessions, and let me tell you, it can be done. It's not easy, but I did come up with some ways to do scene work with primary school children where they got to actually speak to each other on Zoom. Uh, we were using Midsummer Night's Dream for this because it's probably the easiest for that. And this is my gold standard uh, trophy winning, give them this exercise and just do that and they'll be happy forever exercise. I call it famous last words, where everybody gets a page of things people said in Shakespeare just before they died, and they get to choose the line they want to say and then die spectacularly. And that one is an absolute delight. But now I want to use my last minute and a half to talk about the core exercise I do, because the things that people I think generally assume you do with Shakespeare, are narrative-based things and character-based things. And that's actually not what I lean in on with this age group. What I do is I do group devised, expressive imagery-based performances. So the tools of the trade for that are lots of lovely fabric pieces, these laminated sheets, and I put on those portions of text, and then each group gets to choose their own one laminated sheet, one whiteboard marker, and then they're sent away to turn that into a physicalized performance. So I'm showing you there the way different students at different times have marked up their pieces because it's up to them to do it in the way they want. There are certain rules, which are that anyone who wants to speak gets the chance to speak. But more particularly, if you aren't the speaking person, you have to be doing something, because part of what I'm aiming for is to make sure that we don't have a bunch of students standing around staring at a page, which I'm sure any of you who work with drama, there's too much of that. And this is a great way to make sure that they don't do that. What they're doing is responding to imagery. And I think you can see the markup there. So you can see how that group has chosen to mark up what they want to do. So I actually give them imagery-based monologues to work on most of the time. So they're not being characters, they're describing a situation. And they're all given the same props to use that, and then they present to one another. So we're also focusing on being a good audience, on listening skills, and appreciating someone else's verbal expression, rather than in addition to developing their own. And so these are the outcomes that I would say that I have observed in these workshops, which is amazing expansion of vocabulary and voice, and getting back to uniting words and body, but perhaps also most importantly, letting these children learn that their self-expression doesn't have to be limited to what they already know. There's a whole world out there of new forms of expression that they can tap into.